Namaskar, friends, and welcome once again. This is our second last class, and we're going to talk about some contemporary Indian writers of diaspora, and this will really help us in that we will be completing the spectrum of writers who have been writing about diaspora. And since these novels have different settings, that also helps us understand the spread of Indian diaspora. And we are going to talk about these writers. And first of all, we're going to talk about Benny Daniel, whose pen name is Benjamin, and he was born in Kerala, and now he is settled in Bahrain. And we're going to talk about one of his novels, in fact, his debut novel, which was first published in Malayalam as Adu Jividam, that translates to The Goat Life. And it's also a very popular movie with subtitles in several languages. And this novel was a sensation when it was produced. And so Benny Daniel has also won the Kerala Sahitya Academy Award for this novel. And uh, it has been translated in to English and is known as Goat Life, as I said. It's about an abused Malayali migrant worker employed in Saudi Arabia as a goat herd against his will. And that is why this novel is very important, because in our one of our previous classes, when discussing The Circle of Reason by Amitabh Ghosh, we found that the characters make a move to fictional Gulf township Al Ghazira. And again, in this novel, again, we are going to talk about the diasporic life in the Gulf countries. And there are very few novels on this, and this is one of the best known novels on this theme. And it is based on a real life incident. It's of course it's a fictional work, but it's based on a real life uh, event. And it was a bestseller in Kerala, and according to media reports, Benjamin became an overnight sensation with the publication of this hard hitting story, and is currently one of the top sellers in Malayalam. The original Malayalam version of Good Days had gone through over 100 reprints. So you can just imagine the kind of popularity this novel commands. It depicts the life of Nazib Muhammad, an Indian immigrant going missing in Saudi Arabia. Najib's dream was to work in the Persian Gulf region and earn enough money to send back home. But he achieves his dream, only to be propelled by a series of incidents into herding goats in the middle of the desert. In the end, Najib contrives a hazardous scheme to escape his desert prison. And you know India's introduction describes the novel as the strange and bitter. Penguin Books India's introduction describes the novel as the strange and bitter comedy of Najib's life in the desert, and a universal tale of loneliness and alienation. So we have talked enough about migrations to different parts of the world, and all of us know that migration to the Gulf, especially from the southern states of India, forms one of the biggest overseas diasporas of the contemporary times. And obviously, we need to talk about it and the experiences that people have. And it is not so different from other diasporic experiences. Um, as such, we find the same universal theme of loneliness, nostalgia, loss, uh, sense of unbelongingness. But apart from that, also, since the culture in the Gulf is very, very different, obviously they have different sort of experiences. And but yes, I mean, this itself has a chapter in traumatic experiences and traumatic memories of the diasporic individuals. If we look at this novel, and there are other novels also by the same writer that have been listed here. So if we talk about the novel, as I said, the story revolves around Najim Muhammad, who is a young man from Kerala, and he is a man from Arathupuza in Haripad of Kerala state, and is newly married and dreams of a better life and better work, in any of the Arabian states of the Persian Gulf, so that he can uh, make his living conditions better. However, at the King Khalid International Airport, Riyadh, he is clueless as what to do next, and is taken away by an Arab man who he believes to be his work sponsor. The work sponsor takes him to a cattle farm in the middle of a desert, confirming Najib's worst nightmare. The work sponsor hands Najib over to the farm supervisor, and Najib is then used as a shepherd and is assigned to tend goats, sheep, and camels for almost 3.5 years in the remote deserts of Saudi Arabia. He is forced to do back breaking work, kept half hungry, and is denied water to wash, and suffers unimaginably. So, the farm's brutal supervisor keeps Najib in control with a gun and binoculars, and frequently beats him with his belt. And now Najib had to manage this new fate because without the bare human essentials. So his life is not better than the life depicted by Abhimanyu Anant in his Lal Pasina of the coolies in African colonies. They were also subjected to inhuman torture and endless number of hours as working hours, and were half fed, half clad, and suffered like anything without any sense of freedom or agency. So, in this novel, also, Najib, comes very close to that kind of traumatic experience, and in a country where he does not know the language, places, or people, he is far away from any human interaction. And Najib steadily starts to identify himself with the goats. Uh, from He considers himself as one of them. His dreams, desires, avenges, and hopes start to fade away as his mindset has now become similar to that of the goats, and it is highly symbolic. In India, whenever we talk about an aimless or uh, life, or let's say a vegetative kind of life, unhappening, and something that is under the constant control of somebody else, where your life is not your own and you are not allowed to take any of your decisions, we always say that it's goat life, when we are living like animals, not like humans. So, in this novel, we find that Najib finds company in these goats because he has no human company, and this looks very traumatic. Actually, he starts finding solace in them. They turn out to be his confidant. He starts talking to them, And this tells us that he does not find any difference between the life that these goats live and he himself lives. So they are also dependent on others, constantly under vigil, fearing for their life. And you know he is also leading a life like that. Although he has tried absconding multiple times, the supervisor catches him every time and punishes him by denying him food and water. He stops absconding when he finds the skeleton of the previous shepherd buried in the sand, who he thought had escaped. So he is constantly reminded that this is a world from where it's difficult to escape, and that is why he believes that now he has to die there and there is no escape from there. But a ray of hope is always there in him, and that is what keeps pushing him so that he can try and escape one day. So finally, one night, with the help of Ibrahim Khadiri, a Somali worker in the neighboring farm, Nazim Muhammad and his friend Hakim escape from the horrible life uh, to freedom. But the trio fumbles across the desert for days, and young Hakim dies of thirst and fatigue. But Ibrahim Qadiri and Nazib keep moving on, and they stumble across an oasis where they manage to take rest for a few days. In the day they had planned to start moving again, Ibrahim disappears, leaving Nazib alone. Initially devastated, Najib somehow manages to find his way to a nearby highway, where after a day of trying, a kind Arab stops for him and rides him to Al Bata. Over there, he meets uh, Kunjika, a fellow Malayali who helps refugees. And Kunjika nurses him back to health and finally calls back to his hometown. Once Najib started feeling better, he gets himself arrested by the civil police in order to get deported to India with Hamid, who he had met while being with Kunjika. So, in a few weeks, he gets to know that he is being deported to India by the authorities. Feeling ecstatic, he bids his goodbyes to his fellow inmates, and as he boards the plane. So we find that this story revolves around the life of Nazib, who crosses borders, um, leaving behind his family with great hopes and aspirations. He goes to um, Saudi Arabia, but only to find that his dreams are dashed to pieces, and in fact, he fears for his life, and with great difficulty, he somehow manages to escape. So, you know, stripped of his documents and freedom, he is subjected to brutal labor, isolation, and abuse. He tends goats, sheep, and camels under the constant threat of violence from his supervisor. In the vast, unforgiving desert, he is cut off from all human contact, and over time, his sense of self erodes. He begins to identify with the goats, as I said, talking to them and sharing their routines. Dreams and hopes further fade as he is reduced to a near animal existence, surviving only through resilience, faith, and a faint hope for escape. But, as I said, finally he is able to make it. And so, if we look at this novel provides us a lot of themes that align with the theme of diasporic novels. Well, um, goats, my friends, my brother, my blood, goodbye. When he is leaving that country, he's not, feeling for any human being, rather, he feels for the goats who were his constant companions when he was utterly lonely without any hope of getting out of this abysmal condition in his life. Those plants taught me life's great lessons of hope. They whispered to me, Nazib, adopted son of the desert like us, you too must preserve your life and wrestle with this desert. Hot winds and scorching days will pass. Don't surrender to them. Don't grow weary, or you might have to pay with your life. Don't give in. Lie half dead as if meditating. Feel nothingness. So he learns from everything around him. Even the plants teach him the ways of survival, and the plants seem to be keeping his hopes alive that if they can survive that scorching heat, why can't he survive? And there are times when these plants uh, are half fade and almost half dead, but still they come out of it, and so they are resilient, and that is why they survive in that desert. So they teach him the same lessons to um, survive in that condition, and so finally he turns resilient. Migration is one of the themes, as we have seen: exploitation, abuse, and dehumanization, physical and psychological isolation, identity crisis and transformation, search for meaning and spiritual evolution, resilience and human spirit, homelessness, and dislocation. These are the prominent themes that we find in this novel, and it turns out to be one of the modern day epics of diasporic experience, especially setting itself in one of the Gulf countries. The writer met the actual person who suffered, and recounting his meeting with the real life Najib Benjamin reminiscence, and I quote, "But when I heard this tale, I knew this was the story I was waiting to tell the world, and I knew this had to be told. Usually, we only hear of stories of success from the Gulf, but I wanted to talk about the many who lead lives of suffering and pain." So, friends, time and again I have told you uh, how diaspora has both its bright and seamy sides. Mostly we always look at it as a world full of potential and opportunities, but then we hardly talk about all those people who had experiences contrary to what we know, and their number certainly is more compared to successful people. So there is always a need to understand that diaspora is a space where only those people will survive who will be resilient, who will be adaptable, who will have ability to fight and give their best despite the situations being grim at times. So through this novel, Goat Life, the novelist gives us the other side of the diasporic dream, especially of the people who hope to go to the Gulf countries, the oil rich countries, in search of better job prospects and lot of money, so that they can get back home and can lead a life of luxury or comfort. Uh, but then everybody is not that fortunate. That is the motive of this story, that everybody is not that fortunate, and there are a lot of people whose stories die away, buried in the sandy deserts of Gulf. So well, friends, this novel is certainly one of the contemporary novels that needed to be discussed. The second writer that I would like to discuss, he continues to write. uh, Bikram Chand, born in 1961, is clubbed with Jhumpa Lahiri and others as one of the earliest diaspora writers. He's an Indian American writer, brother of film producer Tanuja Chandra, comes from very well known background and good family background, we can say. So, Red Earth and Pouring Rain was his first novel, which was awarded the Commonwealth Writers' Prize, and his writing is characterized by richly layered interwoven narratives engaged with Indian myth, history, and post colonial realities, exploring the themes of identity, exile, and cultural hybridity with the innovative blending of tradition and modern storytelling forms. And that is why he also emerges as one of the uh, better known writers of Indian diaspora. And of his works, as I said, Red Earth and Pouring Rain, Love and Longing in Bombay, Sacred Games, Greek Sublime, The Beauty of Code, The Code of Beauty. These are very, very important novels penned down by him. If we talk about his novel, Red Earth and Pouring Rain, which is an ambitious debut novel, first published in 1995, uh, it masterfully intertwines Indian mythology, colonial history, and contemporary narratives, creating a rich tapestry of stories that explore identity, storytelling, and the complexities of cultural intersections. The novel opens in 1989 with Abhay Misra, a young Indian who has returned home from his studies in the United States. He shoots a monkey that is scavenging in his neighborhood, only to discover that the monkey is the reincarnation of Sanjay Parasar, a 19th century Brahmin poet and freedom fighter. As Sanjay lies dying, the Hindu god of death, Yama, offers him a bargain. If he can keep Yama and an audience of children entertained with stories, he will be allowed to leave. So, this narrative closely comes closer to or closely follows the narrative style of Arabian Nights, as we know. And there are stories after stories. And in fact, this is the condition laid by Lord Yama to Sanjay, that if he continues to entertain him and the host of children, he will continue to live. Encouraged by Hanuman and Ganesh, the gods who are also protectors of storytellers, Sanjay begins to narrate his lifestyle, assisted by Abhay when he becomes too weak to continue. The novel employs a frame narrative. If you remember, we talked about frame narratives. One of the frame narratives that we talked about was by V.S. Naipaul early on, and in that we found that there is in a free state. So we found that there is one particular thread that runs through couple of stories, and then they lead to the same kind of beginning and ending of the story, although they are separate set of stories. So the novel employs a frame narrative, as I said, reminiscent of the Arabian Nights, where stories unfold within stories. Sanjay's tales transport readers to the late 18th and 19th century India, a period marked by the decline of the Mughal Empire and the rise of British colonial power. He recounts his childhood friendship with Sikandar Skinner, an Anglo Indian cavalryman, and their adventures amid the chaos of princely states, European mercenaries, and shifting allegiances. The story also explores the tragic fate of Sikandar's mother, Janvi, and the personal and political betrayals that shaped Sanjay's life. Parallel to Sanjay's historical saga, Abhay narrates his own contemporary journey, a road trip across America with friends, reflecting on cultural dislocation, identity, and the contrasts between Indian tradition and Western modernity. And this is how we find that the diasporic experience is clubbed in this story. The novel begins with Abhay, an Indian student returning home from the US, who shoots a monkey, as I said, that has been uh, stealing from his family. Uh, to everyone's astonishment, the monkey reveals itself as the reincarnation of Sanjay Parashar, as we saw, a 19th century poet and revolutionary. And to delay his death, Sanjay strikes a deal with the gods. He must captivate his audience daily with stories which he types out on a typewriter due to his inability to speak. So Sanjay's tales transport readers through various epochs, from the decline of the Mughal Empire to the rise of British colonialism, introducing a plethora of characters, including Rajput warriors, European mercenaries, and mythical beings. Interwoven with these historical narratives is Abhay's own story. As I said, a road trip across America with fellow students, reflecting on the themes of exile, cultural identity, and the search for belonging. So, when we look at this novel, we find that the novel has themes of diaspora embedded with other themes as well. The future is simple. I can hold it in the palm of my hand, and the present is just a matter of endurance, detachment, and a sense of humor. This is a particular line that appears in the novel. All was alien, and amidst the hanging, entangling creepers of this foreign grammar, all sound became a cacophony. I feared for myself, for my health and sanity, but then I thought of my purpose, of where I was and who I was, a pain, and I pressed on. So, this is indicative of the diasporic experience that narrator has in US, and it's always battling survival and adaptability when you are in another country. So the other themes that are prominently embedded in this novel are storytelling and survival, as we find that the monkey is in fact the reincarnation of Sanjay, the 19th century poet, and he tells the stories, and these stories become means of survival because he has been granted that deal by Lord Yama, that till the point he entertains the people with his storytelling, he will survive. History, myth, and folklore, they are all blend together in this particular story, and so it turns out to be a magical tale, which is a kind of spell binding exile and identity. Through the character of Abhay, we come across the story of exile and identity, cultural hybridity, love, loss, and transformation as well. So, if we look at this novel, Red Earth and Pouring Rain, we need to know that this novel gained widespread acclaim when it was released, and as I said, it won the Commonwealth Writers Prize for Best First Book, and the David Hingham Prize for Fiction. Critics praised its ambitious scope and narrative depth. Shashi Tharoor lauded it as, and I quote, a magnificent tour de force, one of the finest Indian novels of the decade. So, obviously, the novel was an instant hit among the literatures of that time. However, some readers noted that the novel's complexity and dense prose could be challenging, with multiple narratives occasionally leading to a sense of disorientation. But nonetheless, it's a richly woven narrative that delves deep into India's historical and mythological past, while simultaneously exploring contemporary issues of identity and belonging. It is a testament to the enduring power of stories and their ability to transcend time and space. And minded friends, when we talk about the fiction of Indian diaspora, we come across wonderful stories, and these stories are perennial and there is no end to them. They keep on entertaining us, keep on educating us, and keep us charmed. So they will never lose their relevance or their appeal to us. For readers interested in epic tales that challenge and captivate, this novel offers a rewarding experience. The theme of diaspora, as I said, is one of the novel's central and most emotionally resonant elements, where Chandra explores the complexities of displacement, cultural identity, and the struggle to belong, especially through the character of Abhay Misra, an Indian student who returns home from America. So, if we talk about the novel, we find identity and cultural hybridity as embodied in Abhay's character, who is caught between two worlds. He is Indian by birth, but much of his adult identity has been shaped by life in America, and this leads to uh, the feeling of alienation and fragmentation, which is very common among the members of diaspora who straddle different cultures without feeling fully at home in either of them. So he also quite often grapples with the questions like, who am I? And when I'm no longer in India, what part of my identity is American and what remains Indian? So uh, his road trip across America with fellow students also mirrors a kind of modern exile, a search for meaning, purpose, and belonging. It's not just a literal journey but a symbolic one, a pilgrimage of self discovery and reconciliation with a fractured cultural self. So, we find that your inner turmoil results in your external disturbances as well, and Abhay never finds peace with himself. In the process, keeps on moving from one place to another, just in search of peace and stability, which is always deluding him. The act of storytelling, especially by Sanjay the monkey, who types his stories on typewriter after being reincarnated, serves as a metaphorical bridge between worlds. Through stories, the characters reach across generations, cultures, and geographies, stitching together the fragmented lives. So, the novel is also filled with myth, history, and legend, representing an India that exists not just geographically but in memory and literary imagination as well. For the diaspora, the idea of India is often constructed through ancestral stories, books, and nostalgia, a romanticized homeland that is both cherished and unreachable, and that we find in this novel. Again, through the motive of reincarnation, the novel promotes the idea that identity and memory persist through time and transformation. In a diasporic context, this can be read as the metaphor for cultural survival, how heritage is reborn and reshaped across generations. So, uh, we can finally conclude that Chandra in this novel does not offer easy answers but instead presents the diasporic condition as complex, layered, and evolving, much like the structure of the novel itself. So, the third and last writer that I would like to discuss as part of this course is Sanjina Satyan. She is an Indian American writer, and her narratives critique the high pressure environments and expectations placed on second generation Indian Americans, exploring how ambition, guilt, and family responsibility shape their lives. Through magical realism, Satyan highlights the complexities of assimilation, the longing for success, and the tension between personal desires and community expectations. Her major works include Gold Diggers and Goddess Complex, and she is a very contemporary writer, and especially her Gold Diggers is a masterpiece. Her debut novel that masterfully blends magical realism with a coming of age narrative, offering a satirical yet poignant exploration of ambition, identity, and the immigrant experience in America. So, friends, we find that the immigrant parents uh, carry the same demanding self, even if they go to America or other countries. Rather, their expectations from their children are much more, and these expectations sometimes are really hurting for their children, who become victims of the ambitions, over ambitions of their parents. Although we always come across the success stories of these diasporic prodigies, like mostly we come to know about how the Indian second generation diasporic kids own a big prize in America, spelling or something, and has risen to unknown heights. This always happens because the diasporic parents, they keep on pressurizing their children to secure better positions than their parents themselves. When we look at this novel, Gold Diggers, this was a phrase that was used for Jasmine of Bharati Mukherjee, where we found that the first wife of Bud Ripple called her a gold digger, and she thought that it's for money she has married Bud Ripple. In this story, also, uh, basically the diasporic people are looked at as gold diggers by the native population, because they think that they have come from their countries just to take economic advantage of their nation. So in this story, we find that the story centers on Neil Narayan, who is a second generation Indian American teenager growing up in the affluent suburbs of Atlanta during the early 2000s. Neil feels the weight of his parents' expectations and the pressures of the model minority stereotype, but lacks the drive that seems to propel his peers. His life takes a turn when he discovers that his neighbor and childhood crush, Anita Dayal, along with her mother Anjali, are concocting a mystical potion made from stolen gold jewelry. This alchemical lemonade is believed to harness the ambition of the original owners, providing a supernatural boost to those who consume it. Neil becomes entangled in this secret, using the potion to enhance his academic performance and social standing. However, the consequences of their actions lead to a tragic event that fractures their community and relationships. A decade later, Neil is a disillusioned history PhD student in Berkeley, grappling with addiction and a sense of purposelessness. When Anita reappears, now involved in Silicon Valley's high stakes world, she draws Neil into a final scheme involving the gold potion, forcing them both to confront their past and the true cost of their ambitions. So, if we look at this novel, as I said, this is the story of Neil Narayan, a second generation kid. He is smart and funny, but lacks the kind of intense drive that is needed for success in America, or as his parents want from him. And so he is always compared to his brothers and sisters and his neighbors, and he finds himself always uh, at the forefront of the wrath of his parents. We all know that Indian parents are always very coaxing, very demanding, and they always try to realize their ambition through their children. And the children are always coaxed into taking up challenges in life which are even beyond, sometimes beyond their reach or beyond their interest as well. So Neil's world, Neil is forced to take to unfair means alongside Anita and Anjali, simply because he lacks that kind of motivation to partake in the highly competitive world of migrants in US, the Indian migrants, where there is a fair bit of competition among the parents uh, you know to show that their children are the best and they achieve the best. So Anita, his neighbor, she uses this potion that she concocts with her mother, the potion made out of stolen gold jewelry, to boost her chances of getting into Harvard, while Neil, who is desperate for his own age, also joins their scheme. And their gold thefts escalate, and Neil's involvement leads to tragic consequences, including the suicide of a classmate whose ambition was literally drained away. This story jumps forward a decade. Neil is now a graduate student in Berkeley, as I said, but still haunted by the past and struggling with his own sense of direction and guilt. Anita, burnt out from chasing success, reappears in his life, and together they plan one final haste to help Anita's mother, who is suffering from depression. So ultimately, this leads to futility actually, this kind of gold rush. So the group ultimately decides to abandon the magical gold, symbolizing a rejection of the relentless pursuit of the American dream and the toxic pressures of their community. So finally, we find that they come to terms with reality. Um, if we look at the themes in the novel, the only way out is an export through the porthole. His motherland shrinks. Well, this was what it felt like growing up, adults and kids constantly gossiping about one another, judging whether or not you were Indian enough, using I don't know what kind of standards. So, they're under constant pressure from both sides. They have to prove their worth in America. At the same time, they also have to prove their Indian past or Indian connection. And so the immigrant pursuit of the American dream and the costs of ambition lead to this kind of disillusionment at the end. This is what we come to infer from the story of Neil and Anita. The pressures of the model minority myth and intergenerational expectations, um, identity, belonging, and search for self worth, uh, they are very intensely embedded in this story. Mental health and the hidden toll of a relentless competition. Well, friends, so this story comes very close to the contemporary reality in India. Within our country, we find how the children are pushed uh, into you know uh, or rather forced into the ambitions of their parents, and failing to cope up with the expectations of their parents. Sometimes they are even forced to take the ultimate step of killing themselves. So this novel is very very contemporary, and in fact this novel also seems to be cautioning the parents on both sides, India as well as abroad, because Indian parents, whether they are in India or they go abroad, they continue to be behaving just like that, putting all the praises of their um, ambition on their children without realizing what does it do to their children, what does it do to their mental health, and how it takes its toll on them as human beings. So, through the blending of magical realism with social satire to critique simulation and success, the novelist Sadian gives us a very intriguing story of diaspora. And well, we find how the second generation suffers the identity crisis the most, as Neil Narayan suffers. He's caught between the cultural expectations of his immigrant parents and the desire to assimilate into mainstream American life. He's not American enough for his white peers and not Indian enough for his community, creating a feeling of displacement even within his own home. So, his internal conflict reflects a classic diasporic tension: how to forge an identity when you belong to two cultures uh, simultaneously, and neither of them in the real sense. The novel's magical element, a gold based potion that grants ambition and drive, it functions as a metaphor for the immigrant obsession with success and the legacy of inherited expectations. This magic is not just fantastical, it is rooted in desperation, a way to artificially attain the American dream in a society that often withholds it from minorities. So, friends, we find that most of the people who are going to America, they have high dreams. They believe that by hook or crook, they have to turn millionaires in no time so that their life completely changes. And in doing so, they fall a prey to that. They sometimes realize the futility of their dreams. So, the gold used in is often stolen jewelry in this um, story, which is a symbol of cultural and familial heritage, suggesting how diaspora sometimes must sacrifice its own roots to succeed in a foreign land. And then again, we find the generational conflict very much like the namesake, in which Gogol Ganguly, belonging to the second generation, finds it difficult to really live up to the expectations of his um, immigrant parents, the first generation diasporic. Here again we find Neil also finds it very difficult to live up to the expectations of his parents, because he lacks ambition which his parents demand of him, and it's understood as kind of betrayal of his uh, betrayal of the dreams of his parents. um, Cultural performance and code switching, that is also very important in this novel. And we find that Neil and other children of diasporic community often perform their ethnicity in school, in competitions, and in social settings to meet both their American expectations and community standards. And this constant code switching creates anxiety and a sense of alienation amongst them. Neil does not feel, fully uh, seen or accepted in either spaces, highlighting a diasporic liminality or in betweenness that we always talk about. So, if we look at this novel, we can see that finally Neil begins to understand that the American dream he was chasing was not really his own. It was a version inherited, distorted, and pressurized by diaspora. And so he begins to reclaim his story not through success as defined by others, but through reflection, truth, and self acceptance. So, finally, friends, this novel seems to be giving us um, a way forward, that rather than chasing success as defined by others. It is always better to follow your dreams and ambitions as realized by you, that are applicable to you. And so, if we talk about Sadian, we can say that she treats diaspora not as a backdrop but as a living, evolving force that shapes every relationship, every ambition, and every internal struggle in the novel. So, finally, friends, thank you very much. This is all regarding the discussion of the fiction of diaspora. We'll meet again for the last class, in which we will be talking about what we have discussed throughout this course. So it will be a kind of recap, uh, starting from our earliest class till this class. And so we'll try to make sense of, or we'll map our territory, how we started, how we progressed, and how we came to the end of it. So please join me one last time for the next class. Thank you very much.